All right, this is the homeschool dev, and I just want to point out some things here in this video. This video is directed towards the city of Albuquerque health, housing, and homelessness, and the MFA, which is located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. These are funders, the main funders, some of the main funders of the Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico. These, what you see in front of you, the screenshot of my non-compliance, and this is the reason why my voucher is being taken away from me, allegedly. There is no way that I would prevent Supportive Housing Coalition from coming in and doing the annual recertification. My family and I needs housing. Number two, annual income review. I've been in this program since 2014, and I've never lied about annual income or reviews or anything like that. Failure to pay the portion of rent. Um, I would have to say that Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico prevents its clients and consumers from being able to abate the rent, especially when Supportive Housing Coalition is late paying rent, or in the example of the next one, failure to allow HQS inspections. HQS inspections are a part of recertification. What client or homeless individual with children would deny Supportive Housing Coalition to come in and do an inspection, doing an annual recertification when that family needs that housing and recertification and HQS inspections to be done? Supportive housing doesn't have any proof and hasn't presented any proof that these alleged noncompliances have ever taken place. There's no documentation of it. There's no mention of it in the video, audio footage that I'm about to present to you or have been presenting to you over the last 2 months. So, failure to provide documents before adding members to the household. I haven't added anybody to the household. I was trying to add my children to the household, but Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico did not support me in that. Failure to comply with the participant codes of conduct. That's not true. Failure to provide verification of enrollment of school. I homeschool my children. I have been homeschooling my children since 2006, and they are registered. I may not have updated that registry, but in the registry, you will find that I have been homeschooling my children for a very long time. Failure to develop housing retention plan. So a housing retention plan is only developed after there's some type of non-compliance, right? And another thing, like the meeting with Laura Chavez and I took place on June 6th. Um, June 6th, right? This letter comes in at December 7th. So, at what point in time did all of this happen? What point in time did all of this noncompliance take place? Was it prior to my recertification in June? Was it prior to this meeting with Laura Chavez? Because if so, in the audio, she never mentions any of these infractions. As a matter of fact, she tried to incorporate um, some of the tactics that she was planning to use after this meeting to develop this noncompliance, to develop this termination of the voucher, to conspire with TNC management to also terminate the lease agreement, which is in breach because there were no housing inspections done. And everybody is avoiding the fact that code enforcement has failed this unit. So we're going to go and I do what I do best. So now that I know who the funders are, and I have communicated with the funders, the city of Albuquerque, health, housing, and homelessness. I have forwarded them the audio tapes, but they support Laura Chavez in terminating our voucher. They support TNC management and being slum landlords. And if you want to be frank, health, housing, and homelessness are paying TNC management. So I am directing this at the director of health, housing, and homelessness, Gilbert Ramirez, and Mayor Tim Keller also, because that's your office. I've been in that office. And no disrespect to Mr. Ramirez, because Carol Spence headed this department before the name changed, and she is responsible for what has happened to individuals within the Supportive Housing Coalition Network, New Mexico, um, because of the lack of services during COVID. But here's Laura Chavez, and I'll be breaking this video down. Uh, the audio.
I can help you restore some faith with staff, whether it's John or Don or anybody else, but just in terms of how we can all look at it as an opportunity to do better for you, but you're also helping us do better for the entire rest of the 250 households that we serve in Albuquerque. We're also statewide. So, you have me thinking of, wow, we need to do, like you say, a rights and responsibilities sheet, regardless of what it's called. You're helping me think about deeper level of training before staff ever enter somebody's home. And notice I said home, not unit. Technically, it's a unit when we get into funding and compliance, but it's your home, Jerry. So I need to walk that back and make sure that people are adequately trained before they ever step foot. But also, how do we present the paperwork to participants? You mentioned leasing and your right to abate. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to come back to that. Now, that one's going to take me a hot minute. Okay?
We don't need to come back to it. You already said that I was right. And with your agreement, you are agreeing that Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico prohibits the clients from being able to abate rent. And if I was able to abate rent, you wouldn't be saying that I was in non-compliance for not paying rent.
Because I got to also look at your ledgers, and my understanding is it's 5,000. This is off the top of my head. Okay, so at least I'm paying attention to your case, because, but I do deal with 300 people. So but let me pull the ledgers and see what I can do. Form, but let me make sure that they're using it. All right, and if they're not, I will immediately address that with the staff. One thing that's making me think is HUD requires it. The city doesn't. So now what I'm thinking is maybe they're doing it for certain programs, but not for all.
So we have an issue here with these contracts. The city has a set of rules, and HUD has a set of rules. In the short term, Mr. Ramirez, yes, your policies and regulations work locally. But as far as the federal policies and regulations and procedures, which supersedes your department's policies and regulations, those are a conflict of interest and they should be alignment. The strategic plan for supportive housing under Mexico should be your department should be following that model, and your department should be, if you're the funder issuing contracts to agencies, should make sure that everybody is in alignment with the strategic plan, and more importantly, the HUD rules and regulations should be put forth before your policies and regulations.
which I will make sure they start to do universally, regardless of where the funding comes from. All right. And again, I will ask you for your, not only will you sign one and get one, but I will also ask you for your input if you think I can improve on it. But that would be your rights and responsibilities. Jerry, I'm not going to use the word tenant because in my program, you guys are not tenants, you guys are program participants. So what it will say is participation, da da da, or program rights and response, something.
And once again, I want to point out, listen to the tone in this woman's voice. Does that tone say to you that I'm feeling intimidated or threatened by Mr. Smith in any way? Not one time, and we're already a minute, 2 minutes into this, has she ever said anything negative about any non-compliances I have done. And keep that in mind because she's going to keep the same tone throughout, this uh, presentation, the same tone. And she never mentions that I am in non-compliance. She mentions that she's going to do, and Supportive Housing Coalition is going to do everything for my family and I, even if she has to go to the health, housing, and homelessness to obtain reasonable accommodations requests. She throughout this audio has a positive outlook for my family and I, but the opposite has happened.
To that effect. Okay. Um, Let me think of what else you said. Has anybody ever given you a renter's guide? That one, I will be honest with you, sir, it does get a little tricky because when I'm not collecting on rent portion, I am non-compliant. And during COVID, we did provide a reprieve. So the letters that you see were our attempts if people could pay.
So when you're not collecting rent from the clients in the program, you're in non-compliance. But if we want to abate the rent and you're not allowing us to, you're in non-compliance from HUD. And so systematically, this is not working out because if I'm having this issue, everyone else in the program is having this issue. And that's why my family and I are being targeted by the director of health, housing, and homelessness. We are being targeted by Mayor Tim Keller because he is not enforcing what is right. He is, at this point, this department is covering up the fact that they are avoiding issues in these housing voucher programs that are causing civil rights violation and discriminatory practices.
We also didn't take any action during anyone during that time. That reprieve is over. And it actually was over last year. And you should have gotten a letter from my compliance officer, and her name is Jocelyn. And they were at the time warning all of you guys that wow, that reprieve is over. The funders, HUD, City of Albuquerque, Mortgage Finance Authority, etc., they're now requiring us to go back and collect on these.
That doesn't even make sense. if these department and agencies are requiring you to go back and collect back rents from tenant, then what does that say overall about these agencies? Obviously, if a tenant is not paying rent or has some type of hardship, then there's no way that these agencies will come back and collect the rent, collect back rents. That's not even a thing. That would be ethical. So the things that this woman is saying in this audio tape does not line up. And believe me, when the Department of Justice hears this and sees my videos, because this is why I'm making the videos, not to uh, bring attention to myself per se and family, is to bring attention for the unhoused and housed homeless who will be coming into these programs, heading home, which doesn't supply uh, support to everyone. Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico doesn't provide quality services to the homeless community here in New Mexico. And
And I want you to know whether you saw this form or not, I approved RAs for everybody in this program to not implement that last year. So I think I'm not defending him, and I do.
so you submitted a RA request to the city to not collect back rent that the city of Albuquerque or the city Department of Health, Housing, and Homelessness and the MFA, you put in a reasonable request to accommodate the tenants because these agencies was asking you to collect back rent. This doesn't make sense, and I'm so tired. Like I'm exhausted. Like I can't even. Let's move
Want you to know that this could have been handled very differently. But I'm also just pointing out, John, I think, is like maybe in, sometimes they get stuck in like that box. They're not thinking outside the box. They're not thinking of how that would sound to you. They're not thinking of, don't sandwich it in that same email when you're talking about mold. And I will coach him on that. I think what is happening to them is
on. This lady mentions mold. Okay, mold. There's mold in this unit. The city has me and my children still in the unit. Supportive Housing Coalition still has my family and I suffering in this unit. The MFA, who's been contacted by me with the audio, supports what this agency is doing at the moment. And none of them have came to my aid. So I've already reported this issue to the Department of Justice. And believe me, they're going to come to visit the MFA. They're going to come and visit health, housing, and homelessness. They're going to come and visit your department. And you're going to be held responsible for this. Like, there's no way around it. So, in the short term, yes, you have terminated my voucher, but you have not terminated this voice. You will not terminate the audio. You don't have the last word in this. Believe me when I tell you that. So, this is an election year, approaching election year, and the Department of Justice will be here investigating uh, issues that the mayor have put forward as far as housing and such. And I hope it's a big mess for you. I really do. Because you have no explanation at all for the support of supportive housing coalitions fraud. And I'm just going to keep it at that. It's fraud.
They're hearing top down on our monitoring and our audits that we've had so many findings that if they don't start to take action, we will lose the contract. If I lose the contract, I will lose 9 full-time employees, including myself. But more importantly, we would unhouse 230 people.
It is not more importantly, you do not care about the tenants in this program. This is a cash cow. This is a cash cow for supportive housing coalition of New Mexico. This is a cash cow for health, housing, homelessness. This is a cash cow for the MFA, especially when you support fraud. This is not about servicing the homeless. This is about committing fraud and lining your pockets. And then the fallout from that is that me and my family and other members of these housing agencies have to suffer because a lot of clients in the programs they won't fight back because they're scared of losing their voucher. I'm not scared to lose a voucher. I've lost vouchers before, and my family and I are perfectly fine. I appreciate the fact that there are vouchers, but I don't appreciate the fact of being in a housing agency that has federal housing vouchers that discriminate against the tenants and then try to cover it up. On a local level, as if I don't have other options in where I can file complaints to. I'm going to teach every unhoused and homeless or disseminate the information on how to directly bypass local agencies and just file, make filings to fair housing and other agencies that will handle the local bureaucracy.
So I'm not making up excuses. I'm just trying to give you that bird's eye view of like, I think they're also starting to panic a little bit. And so I made a mental note and I also wrote in a more concrete way, I need to come back to them so that they're balancing their duties. Like John is a director, so like he needs to balance his duties around what the contractors are telling him with then how he treats and communicates with the participants. But I do want to make you aware that that's something that's coming from HUD. It is coming from the city. And if I don't start collecting on rent and collecting late fees, I risk non-compliance. But to your point, that doesn't make you personally responsible for all that, and there still could be an RA. Now, I need to also explain to you, there's sometimes when I can approve a reasonable accommodation, like a port, transport, paying your security deposit, your application fees. Like, let's say you do house search, right? Because this may or may not be the best fit for you. We still have to talk about kids. We still have to talk about occupancy because I can also get in trouble for that. So we will come back to that. But I could do an RA, for example, to say maybe we can pay for you to have a moving truck. Maybe that would help you. I can do that. Okay. Where I can't do a reasonable accommodation is that you just like, I can't just like wipe your debt free. That would go to the city. Okay. Or let's say it's a payment plan of, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, sir. I also,
So the city of Albuquerque needs to, hasn't looked at my case, hasn't evaluated my case. Supportive housing has not given me my legal right to appeal. Um, health, housing, and homelessness doesn't want to hear my story or my family's story. The MFA doesn't want to hear my family's story. So who do I have to go to? Who do we have to depend on in this matter? No one in the city, no agencies in the state of Albuquerque are coming to my aid. But the Department of Justice will come to our aid, and that's for sure. So, like I said, in the short term, yes, it appears that you win. Yes, our voucher is taken away, and uh, the lease agreement is terminated, and that's all you have at your disposal to. Uh, that's all of the ammunition that you have is to terminate my voucher. But the Department of Justice will be here, and let's see how much avoiding you do at that point. Will you be able to twist your local policies and regulations and all of the backdoor things that you are doing when the Department of Justice get here? Huh? Will you? I don't think so.
Grew up unhoused and in poverty, and I've dealt with it as an adult too. So I don't mean to sound sarcastic. It could literally be a payment plan of $5 or $10. So when I say payment plan, it doesn't have to be 200, 500 a month. It literally could be you looking at me saying, I could try to do $10 a month, and if I don't make it, then we'll have to revisit this whole agreement. But at the same time, just to satisfy the funder, so that I also don't lose I could lose your voucher. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I can get non-compliant and they take away the funding for your voucher. That's a whole different topic than you losing your voucher because of me non-compliance. But we can talk through that. I still feel
Because
that
I don't
there's a
want to pay.
solution.
I don't want to.
Me losing my voucher because Supportive Housing Coalition did not service me was her last words. Yes, I have complained that Supportive Housing Coalition has not serviced my family and I, but nothing is being done. Everybody is avoiding the client's situation and covering that up to support Laura Chavez and Supportive Housing Coalition and the Department of Health and Housing, Home and Homelessness interests, the MFA's interests, the city of Albuquerque's interests, the state of New Mexico's interests, which is in alignment with the strategic plan for supportive housing. Does the strategic plan for supportive housing support fraud? Do you think that the strategic plan for supportive housing of New Mexico, when the Department of Justice arrives, are going to support the Department of Health, Housing, and Homelessness? Is it going to support Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico? No. They're going to try to throw you under the bus because somebody is going to have to pay for this. And it's probably going to be all agencies. But I know that Supportive Housing Coalition and TNC management will be no more. I will make sure that these two businesses will be out of business because they deserve to be out of business.
Well, I got something else to tell you, but there's so much to share with you.
Yeah.
Our contracts are actually changing this year in July. And when I tell you I'm transparent, I can show you those contracts too. The only thing I can't show you is like people's personal.
Laura Chavez, this whole interview, this whole meeting with her was prior to Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico getting the okay on a new grant. So she's gaslighting me, right, in anticipation for this grant to come. Once the grant, once they receive this grant, that's when I started receiving stuff like this. The discrimination intensified because the the non-compliance and All of the terminations were retaliation from that meeting alone. And everyone is covering this up. So everyone that is covering it up, that's who I would have to come after. Because you're all
information like
guilty of
my social
something.
security number and or John and this is how much everybody makes or something like that. Trust me, we're not in it for the money though.
Yeah, you are in
I
the fact
personally held
you
out on my
are
pay raise.
you are in it for the money and the money only. You don't care about anyone that is homeless and unhoused. That's for certain. You don't care. All you care about is that $2 million contract and your gang, the gang that you employ to harass and discriminate against the clients in the program. The HUD funding is used to support who your gang, Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico's gang, that every day causes harm to the homeless in this program. You need your money to continue inflicting harm to the clients in this program.
Is because of cash flow. So none of us are here because we want to be millionaires. But on the other hand, what I'm letting you know is I would do anything I can to advocate for you. And whether it goes through me or
What you have done and what the city have done is terminate our voucher. So you have not done anything to support my family and I. You have inflicted a lot of pain and suffering on my family and I. That's all. That's it. Pain and suffering.
whether it goes through the city, I would personally submit an RA to the city to find out what we could do about the back pay. So that you're not feeling that it's a violation, but I also don't get violated for it if they monitor me. So I will work on that with you, okay? So when I mean contracts,
So Laura Chavez has submitted a reasonable request to the city on my behalf, and the city and health, housing, and homelessness has done not done anything but harass me and my family by calling my home from private numbers and having uh, their department um, harass me. They didn't come in asking how we can support you and how can we, you know, aid in your need and how can we uh, fix the appeals process for you, Mr. Smith, since you didn't have one at Supportive Housing Coalition. Can we meet with you to discuss what the issues are, what the non-compliances are? Um, Everyone, let's come together and put all the evidence on the table. I put my evidence on the table during that meeting, and it was enough evidence to allegedly suggest fraud, and as a result, the retaliation comes in. The retaliation comes in.
let's talk it through. Leases would be the place to start, whether it's renewed or not. I'm going to give you what's called a TBRA. It stands for tenant-based rental agreement. That's an agreement that we hold with.
Okay, so I had a TBRA, and this meeting happened June 23rd. So how come my reasonable accommodations have not been met. And this was prior to code enforcement coming in, failing my unit. We are still housed in a unit that has failed a HQS inspection, according to the city of Albuquerque. But yet, the Department of Health and Housing and Homelessness know that this is the case. The mayor knows this is the case, but nothing is being done. Nothing is being done. But that's fine because I know when the Department of Justice comes and does its investigation, even if it takes a year and a half, they will compensate my family and I. They will reinstate my voucher. They will give me and my family everything that we asked for in the beginning and more.
Landlord. Um, and I want you to have that information, even if it's blank, just so that you're aware of um, what are the, to your point earlier, what are the responsibilities of the housing administrator versus the landlord? And it would also just give you a glimpse of like,
The reason why there's a misunderstanding between what Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico is supposed to do in the relationship with the management company is all attached to the tenant based rental agreement, the contracts that are supposed to be amended to our leases. The contract is explicit in that it outlines in detail what the responsibilities are, what the protocols and procedures are. That's why that information is not circulated throughout the program because there's no way that health, housing, and homelessness, the MFA, or Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico wants to educate the tenants on their rights. As long as the information is not disseminated, the more the pockets grow for the individuals running the programs. Meaning, like if I don't know my rights, I don't know the rules of engagement, then there is a gray area, a large gray area in which fraud can be committed, civil rights can be violated, discrimination can take place, cover ups can start to manifest, documents can start to be changed in dates and such locally in the short term. But in the long term, when the Department of Justice arrives and goes through all your files, your bank statements, your business emails, then that will uncover the scandal that I have reported that the city of Albuquerque is covering up.
oh, that's what happens when they change ownership, or that's what happens when they sell the property. And this happens to me all the time. They don't tell us. So we could be paying your T&C lease on your apartment right now, and let's say they sell it off to, I don't pick one, Elevated or Monarch or something, and they don't tell us. And then about 4 or 5 months later, they start collecting on me for not paying Jerry's rent at the new management. And I'm like, wait a minute, you never reported. And now this other old agency has been getting your money. Now the old agency has to pay the new agency. And do you know I have to fight for that all the time? Because they don't agree to the contracts that they have with us.
They don't agree to the contracts. Those contracts are HUD contracts. And whenever a HUD contract is not being honored, then it immediately is breached. Those are HUD rules. But you don't breach any of the contracts because you're doing business with these slumlord landlords and agencies. It's just as simple as that, Laura Chavez. You said it. You can't avoid doing business with TNC management because they hold a monopoly on the city. So you're willing to give, or you're willing to provide a quality of service that harms the tenants by doing business with slumlords using government funding.
So but we can talk through that. I still feel
Because
that
I
there's a
want to
solution.
pay. I don't want to.
Well, I got something else to tell you, but there's so much to share with you.
Yeah.
Our contracts are actually changing this year in July. And when I tell you I'm transparent, I can show you those contracts too. The only thing I can't show you is like people's personal information, like my social security number and or John, and this is how much everybody makes or something like that. Trust me, we're not in it for the money though.
Yeah.
I've personally held out on my pay raises because of cash flow. So none of us are here because we want to be millionaires. But on the other hand, what I'm letting you know is I would do anything I can to advocate for you, and whether it goes
What I would do is I would do anything to advocate for you. No, everything that you have done has been to harm us, to inflict pain, suffering, emotional distress on my family and others in this program, and it's going to stop and end. There's no way that an agency that inflicts that type of harm on the community will be in business. There's no way.
through me or whether it goes through the city, I would personally submit an RA to the city to find out what we could do about the back pay so that you're not feeling that it's a violation.
Okay, Mr. Gilbert Ramirez or Tim Keller, did you get the RA? I'm pretty sure you got the RA. So what's taking you so long to act on it? If homelessness and housing is a priority in the state, what's taking you so long to call me, sir?
But I also don't get violated for it if they monitor me. So I will work on that with you, okay? So when I mean contracts, let's talk it through. Leases would be the place to start, whether it's renewed or not. I'm going to give you what's called a TBRA. It stands for tenant-based rental agreement. That's an agreement that we hold with the landlord. Um, and I want you to have that information, even if it's blank.
Why would you want to hand me a TBRA contract when it's blank? Hand me the TBRA contract that you said all the participants have signed in the program. And another point, if you were giving me the TBRA contract on June 23rd, 2023, and that was my first time ever seeing that document since I've been in the program. I've been in the program since 2014. I never knew that there was a TBRA contract until I ended up in this predicament and had to do my own research. Or let me change that. The first time that I heard of the TBRA contract was in this meeting, and it wasn't explained in detail. All it was explained to me that it was a conflict of interest. I had to go and do this research and pull up the research to find out the nuances of this contract.
Just so that you're aware of um, what are the, to your point earlier, what are the responsibilities of the housing administrator versus the landlord? And it would also just give you a glimpse of like, oh, that's what happens when they change ownership, or that's what happens when they sell the property. And this happens to me all the time. They don't tell us. So we could be paying your TNC lease on your apartment right now, and let's say they sell it off to I don't pick one, Elevated or Monarch or something. They don't tell us. And then about 4 or 5 months later, they start collecting on me for not paying Jerry's rent at the new management. And I'm like, wait a minute, you never reported. And now this other old agency has been getting your money. Now the old agency has to pay the new agency. And do you know I have to fight for that all the time? Because they don't agree to the contracts that they have with us.
So when these agencies engage in that type of practice, do you terminate the business agreement with them, or do you continue to do business with them? I believe that you choose to continue doing business with them because if you're paying rent to an agency and they switch companies, what is the fallout on the tenant? How does that affect the tenant?
So I want you to get a copy of that just because you mentioned earlier just having more access to the regulations. That's not necessarily a reg, but it would at least show you what the contractual agreements we have with our landlords. All right. The other thing I mentioned is I'm going to give you a copy of the participation agreement.
The contractual agreement with the landlords. That will show you the contractual agreement of the landlords. Let me reiterate. If the tenant based rental agreement contracts were amended to the leases like they were supposed to be, and if we had physical copies also of those documents with our signatures on them, they would be valid. No one in this program has a signed copy of a tenant based rental agreement, not even myself.
That's the agreement that you signed with us in terms of what, now I'm not saying it's doing a good enough job, okay, but that's our attempt at explaining what is your program participation and what could result in a violation.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying we can't improve, but that's what we have
Well, I
currently.
didn't never get a copy of
Okay,
it.
so we'll do.
I just said I never got a copy of the participants agreement plan. But here, failure to comply with participants code of conduct. Why? Because I didn't sign the agreement. If I'm not in an agreement with how you're servicing me, then that's not being non-compliant, and that isn't that alone with these other non-compliances doesn't give you the right to exterminate or terminate my voucher. According to HUD rules, according to HUD rules, none of these give Supportive Housing Coalition or the City of New Mexico uh, leverage to terminate our vouchers. Supportive, the strategic plan for supportive housing, strictly on page 6, states that tenants should not be unhoused. Tenants should stay housed and they shouldn't be unhoused once they're in the program under under only extreme circumstances.
Do that, okay? Let me think through a couple more. HQ, actually, let me go a couple more. Rent calculations. Has anybody ever given you a copy, like there's a form and you know, you're mentioning why even is it 30%, da, da, da. Has anybody ever given you a copy of that? Okay. So that's called a rent calc and that is used, they do use HUD regulations for that. Anything I tell you,
That sheet, the 30% where you calculate your rent, let me be clear. to you, the Department of Health, Housing, and Homelessness, to the MFA, to Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico. Let me be very clear. One of the main reasons that the Shelter Plus program was shut down in Sandoval County was because of these rental adjustment sheets. No one in no tenant has a copy of that in their file. No one. And if I was able to get my hands on there and do some calculations, I could calculate the fraud in the program just like I did in 2013 with the Shelter Plus program. One of the reasons why agencies don't forward the information up front to the tenants is because if you have a tenant that is doesn't fall under certain stereotypes and they can self advocate for themselves, they would go in and crunch the numbers. They would go in and crunch the numbers. And once the numbers didn't come out right, then I would have the option to go to these agencies, the local funders. But if there's a cover up involved, then I also have the option to go to the Inspector General's office, file a fair housing complaint. But these agencies just lead you to the local agencies that are supposed to be, uh, they're going to send you to that are all uh, in alignment with each other to confuse you and lead you on a path to becoming unhoused because none of those agencies are really trying to support you and your family situation at that time or the individual's uh, situation. And that's my experience. I've called almost tons of agencies in the last 2 months regarding this issue, and they all deny jurisdiction and send me to other agencies, and it just creates a cycle and a cycle and a cycle, and I'm tired of that cycle. So, with my experience, I know to go to Inspector General's office or file a fair housing complaint.
Whether it's verbal or in an email or texting or anything later, I will always back it up for you. I might not do it in that moment. Like right now, I can tell you the regulation is 24 CFR 578. Well, who cares? I will print that for you, or I will email it to you, or I will give you a link. Okay? Anything that you ever want me to support, I promise, I give you my word, I will support.
Laura Chavez is a liar. She is not good for the homeless community. She is not good for Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico. She is not a good representation of what the Department of Health, Housing, and Homeless, or the MFA, or the Strategic Plan for Supportive Housing of New Mexico. She needs to be fired immediately. Immediately.
Okay? If something's a landlord tenant law versus a HUD law, I will make that clear. And then I will actually show you where to find it, or I will give you a copy myself. I give you my word. All right? And my staff will be informed as well. And if you ever ask for that, they are obligated to give it to you. Okay? Right, Cal, let me think through a couple more.
And one of the reasons that I'm going to strongly suggest that Supportive Housing Coalition of New Mexico is ran out of business and TNC management is ran out of business is because of the city's effort and all of the supervising agencies cover up in this manner. That's why, and it's deserving. It's deserving.
I think there is a rights and responsibility.
So, um, I would like to say that the Health, Housing, and Homelessness Department that Mayor Tim Keller has uh, come up with, and the MFA support fraud, they have all been delivered the audio tape. The videos have been sent to the governor. The videos have been sent to the congresswoman. The videos have been sent and audio have been sent to the mayor. This is a statewide cover up and it's going to be exposed. That's my job to do that, to make that happen. And I've already started the process. This needs to be addressed because the homeless clients in this program do not feel safe. They're afraid to speak out because they may lose their vouchers. I have spoke to several of them. They don't want to say anything because they're in fear of losing their vouchers. I'm not afraid of losing my voucher. Like I'm not gonna come back on my knees begging support for housing with the city of Albuquerque to give me a housing voucher. I will retain my housing voucher once the Department of Justice comes to the state of New Mexico and lays down the land of the law. That's what's gonna happen. Peace. This is the homeschool dad.